In my 40 years on the bench, I've seen every type of defendant walk through those courtroom doors. The remorseful ones who made genuine mistakes, the scared young people who didn't think about consequences, the angry ones who still don't understand what they've done. But this case? This one stayed with me long after I delivered my verdict. When a billionaire's son walked into my courtroom after assaulting a 72-year-old Vietnam veteran, and then had the audacity to mock him right in front of me, I knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary hearing. Let me tell you what happened that day, and why sometimes the most privileged among us need the hardest lessons about respect, accountability, and what it truly means to face justice. The case file landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning. I remember it clearly because my clerk flagged it as sensitive before I even opened it. Aggravated assault, assault on an elderly person, disorderly conduct. The defendant, Marcus Whitmore III, 24 years old, son of tech billionaire Richard Whitmore II. The victim, Joseph Joe Martinez, 72 years old, United States Marine Corps veteran, Purple Heart recipient. I've been doing this job long enough to know that wealth doesn't determine guilt or innocence. Everyone deserves the same fair process in my courtroom, whether they're homeless or a billionaire's child. But as I read through the police report, something troubled me deeply. The incident occurred at a charity gala, ironically, one benefiting veteran services. Joe Martinez had been volunteering as a parking attendant, helping direct guests to their spots. According to the report, Marcus Whitmore had shown up with his Lamborghini, demanding valet service even though it wasn't offered. When Joe politely explained the self-parking policy, Marcus became verbally abusive. I pulled up the security footage on my computer. What I saw next made me take off my glasses and rub my eyes. At 72 years old, Joe was just trying to do his volunteer work with dignity. He didn't deserve what happened to him. Nobody does. The medical report showed facial bruising, a cut requiring 4 stitches, and, this concerned me most, potential hearing damage from being struck near the ear. For a man in his 70s, these injuries weren't minor. They were serious. And the photographs attached to the file showed just how bad it was. Let me walk you through what happened that evening, based on the evidence I reviewed. It was a Saturday night, the annual Veterans Hope Foundation Gala at the Waterford Estate. Beautiful venue, important cause. Joe Martinez had volunteered for years at these events. He told me later it was his way of staying connected to his fellow veterans. When I watched the security footage, and I watched it multiple times, I saw Marcus Whitmore pull up in his bright yellow Lamborghini around 7:15 p.m. Joe approached with a smile, holding a parking map. I could see him gesturing toward the guest parking area about 50 yards away. The video had no audio, but I didn't need it. Marcus's body language said everything. He stepped out of his car, threw his keys at Joe, literally threw them, and pointed at the valet stand. Joe shook his head politely and handed the keys back, pointing again at the self-parking area. That's when I saw Marcus step closer, aggressive, invading Joe's space. Joe held his ground. Marine training never leaves you, I suppose, and calmly continued explaining. He even offered to walk Marcus to a close parking spot. Then it happened. Marcus shoved Joe backward, hard. Joe stumbled but caught himself. According to witness statements, Marcus then said, and I quote from 3 separate witnesses, "Get out of my way, old man, before I put you in the ground where you belong." I had to pause the video at that point, take a breath. This 72-year-old veteran, Purple Heart recipient, was being threatened while volunteering at a charity event by someone who had every advantage in life, but it got worse. When Joe stood his ground and calmly stated that he was calling security, Marcus struck him. Open-handed slap across the face, followed immediately by a closed-fist punch to the side of Joe's head. The impact, I could see it clear as day on that video, knocked Joe to the ground. Marcus then got back in his car and drove away, leaving Joe bleeding on the pavement. He parked in the VIP section and walked into the gala like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just assaulted an elderly man, like it was beneath his concern. Security footage from inside the venue showed Marcus drinking, laughing with friends, posing for photos. Meanwhile, Joe was being treated by paramedics outside. The responding officers found Marcus at the bar. According to their report, When informed he was being arrested for assault, Marcus laughed and said, "Do you know who my father is?" That phrase. I've heard it so many times over the years, and it never, ever ends well for the person who says it. As I continued reviewing the evidence over the following days, the picture became crystal clear. This wasn't a he said situation. This was documented from multiple angles, with multiple witnesses. 7 people gave statements. All 7 confirmed the same sequence of events. The security footage showed 3 different camera angles. The medical reports were extensive. Joe had been treated at Rhode Island Hospital, received 4 stitches above his left eye, and had significant bruising on his face and ribs from hitting the pavement. But what troubled me most was the follow-up medical examination. Joe reported persistent ringing in his left ear. The doctor's assessment indicated possible permanent hearing damage from the blow to the head. At 72 years old, with a Purple Heart from serving his country, this man was now dealing with injuries inflicted by someone who should have been thanking him for his service. I reviewed Marcus's background. No prior criminal record, money, and good lawyers can help with that. But there were 3 previous complaints. A road rage incident that was settled out of court. An altercation at a country club that was handled internally. A confrontation with a hotel employee that disappeared after the Whitmore family made a generous donation. This pattern told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a bad night or poor judgment. This was learned behavior. This was someone who had been taught, or never untaught, that his wealth and his father's name put him above consequences. The prosecution had an airtight case. The defense attorney, an expensive lawyer from Boston, had already tried to contact my office about a plea deal. Reduced charges, community service, restitution, the standard playbook for wealthy defendants. I had my clerk respond with a simple message. Judge Caprio will hear the case on the scheduled date. All parties should be prepared for a full hearing. Because here's what I've learned in 40 years. Justice isn't about making things easy or convenient. It's about making things right. By the time Marcus's court date arrived 2 weeks later, something unexpected had happened. The security footage had been leaked, probably by someone at the venue who was disgusted by what they'd seen. It went viral. My grandson showed me the video on his phone. Hugh News. I won't lie, it created pressure. My office received hundreds of calls. Some were supportive, some were from people connected to the Whitmore family, politely suggesting that perhaps this was blown out of proportion. I even received a call from a city councilman I've known for 20 years, gently hinting that Richard Whitmore was a significant donor to various civic projects. I listened to everyone. Then I did what I've always done. I focused on the facts, the law, and the people involved. Not the money, not the media attention, not the political pressure. My wife asked me if I was worried about the public attention. I told her what I tell everyone. It doesn't matter if 8 people see this case or 8 million. In my courtroom, everyone gets the same fair process. The viral video doesn't change the evidence. It doesn't change what happened to Joe. And it certainly doesn't change my responsibility as a judge. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the weight of this one. The whole world was watching. And more importantly, veterans across the country were watching to see if one of their own would get justice. The morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse to find something I rarely see. A line of people waiting to get into the courtroom. Veterans in their service jackets, local residents, media with cameras. My bailiff told me we'd had to set up overflow seating in the adjacent conference room. I took a moment in my chambers before walking out, said a quiet prayer like I always do, asked for wisdom, patience, and the clarity to do what was right. When I entered the courtroom and took the bench, I immediately noticed Marcus Whitmore sitting at the defense table. Designer suit. I'd bet it cost more than most people make in a month. Perfect haircut. Expensive watch catching the light. And an expression that troubled me deeply. Boredom. He looked bored. Next to him sat his attorney, Michael Chen, a lawyer I'd seen before in high-profile cases. Professional, competent, expensive. Behind them, in the front row, sat Richard Whitmore II himself. I recognized him from the newspapers, stone-faced, arms crossed. On the other side of the courtroom sat Joe Martinez. He wore his Marine Corps jacket, medals pinned to his chest. The bruising on his face had faded to yellow and green, but you could still see it. His left eye was slightly swollen. And when I looked at him, he sat with the quiet dignity of a man who had faced worse things than courtrooms. Behind Joe sat at least 30 veterans. I recognized some from local VFW posts. They'd come to support one of their own. The sight moved me, honestly. That's what brotherhood looks like. All rise, my bailiff announced, and we began. I started with the standard preliminaries, making sure everyone understood the charges and the process. Marcus's attorney waived the reading of charges. They'd been over this already. We moved directly to the evidence presentation. The prosecutor played the security footage. I watched Marcus as it played. He barely looked at the screen, just examined his fingernails, shifted in his seat, checked his phone until his attorney quietly took it from him. When the video showed the moment of assault, Joe being struck and falling to the pavement, I heard gasps from the gallery. I saw several veterans lean forward, their faces hardening. But Marcus, he shrugged, actually shrugged. I leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore, did you just shrug?" He looked up at me with an expression I've seen too many times, entitled indifference. "Your Honor, the angle makes it look worse than it was. He barely fell." I felt my jaw tighten. I've been doing this long enough to maintain composure, but his casual dismissal of what we'd all just witnessed tested that patience. "Mr. Whitmore, we have 3 camera angles. They all show the same thing. We have 7 witness statements. They all say the same thing. And we have medical records showing Mr. Martinez required stitches and may have permanent hearing damage. How exactly does the angle make that less than it was?" His attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that an unfortunate altercation occurred." "Counselor," I interrupted gently but firmly, "I'm asking your client. Mr. Whitmore, do you have an explanation for why you struck a 72-year-old veteran?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. He was being difficult. I had somewhere to be. I asked him politely to move, and he refused. The courtroom erupted. I had to use my gavel. "Order, everyone, order." I turned back to Marcus. "You consider throwing keys at someone and shoving them, asking politely." "Your Honor," his attorney interjected, "we're prepared to offer full restitution to Mr. Martinez, cover all medical expenses, and my client is willing to complete anger management courses." "I'll hear from Mr. Martinez," I said. "Mr. Martinez, would you like to address the court?" Joe stood slowly. He walked to the witness stand with the careful gait of someone whose body had been through war and was now dealing with new injuries. He was sworn in, and I asked him to tell me, in his own words, what happened. His testimony broke my heart. He spoke quietly, clearly, with no embellishment, just facts. He explained that he'd been volunteering at veteran events for 15 years, that it gave him purpose, that he always tried to treat everyone with respect, no matter who they were. "Your Honor," Joe said, his voice steady, "I've been hit before. In combat, you expect it. But this, at a charity event for veterans, by someone who's never served, never sacrificed, never understood what it means to put others before yourself?" He paused. "I don't want his money. I just want him to understand that actions have consequences, that wealth doesn't put you above basic human decency." The courtroom was silent. You could hear people breathing. I saw several veterans wiping their eyes. I thanked Joe and asked him to step down. Then I turned to Marcus. "Mr. Whitmore, did you hear what Mr. Martinez just said?" Marcus nodded lazily. "Yeah, I heard him." "And do you have anything you'd like to say to him? Any apology? Any acknowledgement of the harm you caused?" Marcus looked at his attorney, who nodded encouragingly. Marcus sighed, like this was all such an inconvenience, and said, "I'm sorry you got hurt, not I'm sorry I hurt you, not I'm sorry for my actions, just I'm sorry you got hurt," like it was something that happened to Joe, not something Marcus did. That's when my bailiff approached the bench with a piece of paper. "Your Honor, you need to see this." It was a printout of social media posts. from Marcus's Instagram account, posted just 2 days earlier. Photos of him at a yacht party with the caption, "Some people are pressed about mistakes. I'm pressed about this Caribbean tan. Such no worries. Such no living my best life." Another post from the day before. Courtroom visit tomorrow. Hopefully the judge got his coffee and isn't as dramatic as everyone's making this out to be. I felt something inside me shift. I've been patient with a lot of defendants over the years. I've given second chances, third chances, even fourth chances when I believed someone could change. But this wasn't a person who made a mistake. This was a person who didn't believe he'd made a mistake at all. I looked at Marcus Whitmore for a long moment, really looked at him. He was still confident, still smiling slightly, still didn't understand the situation he was in. That's when I knew what I had to do. I took a breath, composed myself. This wasn't about my anger or disappointment. This was about justice, accountability, and a lesson that clearly had never been taught. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say." He looked up at me, finally giving me his full attention. "I've been a judge for 40 years. I've seen thousands of defendants. Some are remorseful. Some are scared. Some genuinely made mistakes they regret deeply. And you know what? For those people, I try to balance justice with mercy. I try to give them a path to redemption." I paused. "You are not one of those people." I saw his smile fade slightly. "Mr. Martinez is 72 years old. He served in the United States Marine Corps. He earned a Purple Heart. Do you even know what that means? It means he was wounded in combat while serving this country, while protecting the freedoms that allow you to drive expensive cars and post dismissive comments on social media." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He was volunteering at a charity event for veterans. He was giving his time at 72 years old to help others. And you assaulted him because he asked you to follow the same parking rules as everyone else. I picked up the social media printouts, and then you posted on Instagram that you hope I'm not dramatic, that this is no worries, that you're more concerned about your tan than about the 72-year-old man you put in the hospital. The courtroom was absolutely silent. "Let me tell you what's not nothing, Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Martinez's injuries aren't nothing. His possible permanent hearing loss isn't nothing. The fact that he now feels unsafe volunteering, doing something he loved, that's not nothing. Your complete and utter lack of remorse isn't nothing." I let that sink in. Your attorney offered a plea deal, reduced charges, community service, restitution, and under different circumstances with a different defendant who showed genuine remorse, I might have considered it. But you've shown me exactly who you are, and I believe you when you show me that. I opened the sentencing guidelines in front of me. This court finds you guilty on all charges: aggravated assault, assault on an elderly person, disorderly conduct. Here's what I'm ordering, Mr. Whitmore, and I want you to understand why each piece matters. His attorney stood. "Your Honor, if I might—" "Sit down, counselor. I'm not finished." He sat. "First, the maximum sentence for aggravated assault on an elderly person in Rhode Island is 15 years. I'm sentencing you to 2 years in the adult correctional institutions, with the possibility of parole after 18 months based on behavior and genuine rehabilitation." I heard gasps. Marcus's face went white. His father stood up in the gallery before sitting back down. "Why 2 years?" "Because you need to understand that wealth doesn't insulate you from consequences. Because you need time to reflect on who you are and who you want to become. Because clearly, 24 years of privilege haven't taught you basic human decency. Second, upon release, you will complete 2,000 hours of community service, not at a charity gala where you can show up in a tuxedo and take photos, at the VA medical center doing whatever work they assign you, cleaning, maintenance, assisting staff, whatever helps our veterans. Why 2,000 hours? Because Mr. Martinez has spent thousands of hours serving others. It's time you learned what service actually means. Third, You will complete a cognitive behavioral therapy program focused on entitlement, empathy, and impulse control. I'm ordering psychological evaluation and treatment to be completed at your expense. Fourth, you will write a letter of apology to Mr. Martinez, a real one, not written by your attorney, not a non-apology. A genuine acknowledgement of harm and remorse. Mr. Martinez is under no obligation to read it or accept it, but you will write it. Fifth, full restitution for all medical expenses, plus $50,000 in compensatory damages for pain and suffering and future medical needs related to hearing loss. I looked directly at Marcus. His confidence had completely evaporated. Reality was finally setting in. Finally, I'm ordering that for 5 years following your release, any subsequent assault charge, any physical altercation, will result in the remainder of your 15-year maximum sentence being enforced. You'll have a clean slate, but you won't have unlimited chances. I paused. Let it all sink in. Mr. Whitmore, I don't take pleasure in sending anyone to prison. That's not why I became a judge. But I have a responsibility to Mr. Martinez, to every veteran who's ever been disrespected, and frankly, to you, to ensure that actions have consequences. Your father's money can buy you expensive lawyers. It can buy you cars and yachts and whatever else you want, but it cannot buy you out of accountability. Not in my courtroom. I hope, genuinely hope, that you use these next 2 years to become a better person, to develop empathy, to understand that every person, regardless of their age or income or status, deserves basic respect and dignity. Because right now, Mr. Whitmore, the person I see in front of me is someone who has never been told no, someone who has never faced real consequences, someone who thinks other people exist to serve his convenience. That changes today. I brought down my gavel. Bailiff, please take Mr. Whitmore into custody. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted after I adjourned. Marcus wore handcuffed, and for the first time I saw real emotion on his face. Fear, shock. The reality that he was going to jail was finally hitting him. His father pushed through the crowd, shouting something about appeals. His attorney was already on his phone. But what I remember most clearly was the veterans. They stood as one, saluted Joe Martinez, and then quietly filed out. No celebration, no cheering, just quiet dignity and respect for their brother in arms. Joe approached the bench as the courtroom cleared. He extended his hand, and I shook it. Judge Caprio, thank you. Not just for me, but for all of us. I shook my head. Mr. Martinez, I should be thanking you for your service, for your patience through this whole ordeal, for your dignity. You deserved better than what happened to you. He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. I got justice today, Your Honor. That's all any of us can ask for. After everyone left, I sat in my chambers for a long time, thought about the case, wondered if I'd been too harsh, questioned whether 2 years was proportionate. But then I thought about Joe's face when he talked about feeling unsafe now, about veterans watching to see if one of their own mattered, about young people who might see this case and learn that wealth doesn't equal immunity. The video of my ruling went viral within hours. My grandson showed me again. This time it had 8 million views. People were commenting by the thousands. Most were supportive. Some thought I was too harsh. A few thought I wasn't harsh enough. But you know what? Those numbers don't matter to me. What matters is that Joe Martinez got justice. What matters is that Marcus Whitmore will have 2 years to think about who he wants to be. What matters is that message was sent. In my courtroom, everyone is equal before the law. 3 months later, I received an update from the prison system. Marcus had been placed in a medium security facility. No special treatment despite his family's attempts. He was in counseling, reportedly struggling with the adjustment. Good. Struggle builds character. I also received a letter from Joe Martinez. He'd gone back to volunteering at a different venue with different security procedures, but he'd gone back. He wrote, "You gave me my dignity back, Judge. Thank you." That letter sits in my desk drawer. On hard days, I read it, and I remember why I do this job. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this case, it's this. Respect isn't something you give to people because of their status, their age, or their uniform. Respect is something you give to people because they're human beings. Joe Martinez didn't deserve respect just because he was a veteran, though that certainly warranted additional recognition. He deserved respect because he was a 72-year-old man doing volunteer work, trying to help others. Every person deserves that basic level of human dignity. Marcus Whitmore grew up in a world where money solved problems, where settlements made criminal complaints disappear, where his father's name opened doors and closed cases. But here's what he never learned. All the money in the world can't buy you character. It can't buy you empathy, and it certainly can't buy you out of accountability forever. I've been on this bench for 40 years, and I've learned something important. The purpose of the justice system isn't revenge. It's not about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about accountability, rehabilitation, and protecting the community. Did I send Marcus Whitmore to prison because I was angry? No. I sent him because he needed to understand, maybe for the first time in his life, that his actions have real consequences for real people. Because without that understanding, he was going to hurt someone else. Maybe worse next time. Social media has created this culture where we post our lives for validation, where we mock serious things for likes, where we live in a bubble of carefully curated unreality. But the law, the courtroom, that's where reality lives. And reality doesn't care about your follower count or your father's bank account. To the veterans watching this, you matter. Your service matters. Your dignity matters. And when someone disrespects you, there are people, judges, lawyers, police officers, fellow citizens who will stand up for you. I will always stand up for you. To young people watching this, learn from Marcus's mistake before you have to live it. Treat people with respect, all people. The parking attendant, the cashier, the janitor, the veteran, the elderly person trying to do their job. Because how you treat people when you think no one important is watching, that's who you really are. And to anyone who thinks wealth or privilege puts them above consequences, my courtroom door is always open. And I promise you, everyone who walks through it gets the same justice, the same standards, the same accountability. That's what justice means to me. After 40 years on this bench, after thousands of cases, after seeing the best and worst of humanity, that's what I still believe. Justice is blind, and in my courtroom, it always will be.